Okay, so I want to just finish the thought about Nimrod. Okay, so I was trying to say, and then my son interrupted. Nimrod was a Gibborim, and that means he became a mighty man. But that is a reference to pre-flood events, and I mentioned that there is this story of the Nephilim. So Genesis 6 talks about how in the days of Noah, when the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were beautiful, they took wives of them, all that they chose, right? 6 Genesis 6:3, 6:4, and there were giants in the earth in those days. That's that word, I think. And also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became the mighty men, which were old men of renown. Now, this word mighty men is Gibborim. This word giant is Nephilim. The Nephilim are the fallen ones, and the Gibborim is this word mighty men, where we also get the word tyrant from, I think. Hold on a second. I get too confused. Nephilim may also mean tyrant. Mighty men, powerful, tyrant. Yeah, okay, that's the Gibborim. And the Nephilim means that they were, it also can be translated, actually, tyrant, but also giant. And the literal means to fall, or earthborn, I think. It's been a while since I studied that. Anyway, okay. So that's why the flood came. Why was every man's imagination of the thoughts of his heart only evil continually? Well, man had fallen, yes, but there's something else going on here where there's a demonic breaking out, where the nature of man is being tampered with, the gene pool is being tampered with, and there's demonic activity on the earth through this Nephilim, right? And this is why God called for the flood, and he said Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And then it talks about how Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and it talks about his genealogy, but that genealogy was perfect back to Adam. So that's what it means that he was perfect in his generations. He was not he didn't have this intermingling going on between fallen angels and man, which were a satanic plot against the seed of the woman, and also the beginnings of his attempt to create his own seed, the seed of the serpent. And then in 6:12 it says that all flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth. And this is more than just being bad. This is referring to all kinds of stuff. And if you go into the occult lore, like the other religions and their histories, they seem to indicate that these beings called the Watchers, which the Bible identifies as the fallen angels, were doing genetic experiments on mankind and also producing crossbreeds by genetically experimenting with crossing animals, which is where we get the stories of the like centaurs and horse and the unicorn and the horse man combinations and all these crazy combinations of ancient lore prior to the flood. A lot of that stuff has its roots in real stuff that was going on as these fallen angels were attempting to genetically manipulate mankind. And so when Jesus talked about as it is in the days of Noah, so shall it become so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man, he was speaking not just of marriage and giving in marriage and everything like that, but this whole thing is alluded to. And, it's interesting because two things happened in 1947 and 48. On the one hand, we did have Israel regathered into the land, but you know what else happened is the Roswell incident and the outbreak of the whole UFO phenomenon starting to emerge in the public consciousness. And this is all related because I got saved through this stuff. So, one of the things about the UFO phenomenon that's really a big deal is, number one, it has a spiritual message, right? These beings are not beings from interstellar distances. They've figured out through the Drake equation and science and all that that space is too big, and we don't see the evidence of them out in space, and we don't see the signatures of interstellar travel that you would see if they were coming from other places. But they behave in a way that seems to be more interdimensional. They're physical. These UFOs have been tracked on multiple radar, and they leave signatures, heat signatures, and radiation, so they can be seen. So they're physical, and yet they defy all the laws of physics, and they blink in and out of seeming existence. They materialize and dematerialize without leaving a trace, and they can make right-angle turns at way beyond the speed of sound, which is supposedly physically impossible. So that indicates that they're interdimensional. They're messing with dimensional stuff. And so anyway, there's these sightings all over the place, right? Well, the other thing that accompanies these beings is abduction accounts where they harvest human embryos and genetic manipulations. It's a big part of the story. And if you don't know about this stuff, you don't have to go digging it out. But there's a sizable part of the population that has identical stories that have all been verified by psychologists who, and these people don't know each other, and they've been telling the same story to their psychologists of their abduction accounts and recounting these visitors and their what they look like and everything, and the stories are the same, and the behavior is the same, and the message is the same. And these beings claim to be the gods of old, okay? And they have a spiritual message. And anyway, so yes, these are the days of Noah that we're in, and we're going to see a culmination of all this kind of stuff, because it's all part of the lie, the grand delusion, or the great delusion that's going to come upon the earth, especially after the church is gone. And it'll relate to the antichrist, who will be in some way related to all this, okay? So anyway, back to Nimrod. He was the person after the flood who somehow became a Gibborim. Now, he's the first one. These were the offspring before the flood. They were the offspring directly of the angels intermingling with mankind. How did he become a Gibborim? We have no idea. But the occult lore celebrates this as he is the first person to ascend into godhood. And he apparently had supernatural powers, and it's interesting because if you go into all the superhero lore and everything, a lot of that stuff is echoes and points back to Nimrod. So he's been fragmented in so many different stories, which are attributes of his person. And we saw this in the Greco-Roman mythology and all the different pantheons of these men who were the offspring of the gods. Those all point back to Nimrod. And Nimrod, so he's like the first superhero. And yet he was capitalizing on a time before the flood where this was common, where the gods and the demigods were ruling the earth. And so, and you can dig into this, because each of the world empires has this same pantheon of angelic beings that descended after a war in the heavens and took human wives and created offspring. And these offspring were evil. The stories involve avarice and lust and greed and incest and murder and rape of parents and murder of parents, and just absolutely awful things that reveal the satanic and bloodthirsty character of these Nephilim beings that the population was led to worship as the gods and the demigods, the men of great and the men of renown. And according to Peter and Jude, these angels went after strange flesh, and they were locked down in the chains until the day of judgment. And according to Enoch, there's 70 generations before this judgment's going to happen. And they were locked in a place called Tartarus, according to Peter. And that is a Greek word that's only used once in the New Testament. But it refers to a place in Greek mythology where these beings called the Titans, who were giants, descended, I think, from Zeus or Jupiter. They went to war and were judged, and they were buried in this, or imprisoned in this place called Tartarus, which they say is identified with the abyss, identified with the hell, but way below hell. As far as heaven is above the earth, so is the abyss beneath hell. That kind of distance. It's a dark abode of the woe. And according to Revelation 9, that abyss apparently is going to be opened again. And out of that pit is going to come the spirit that will embody the final world ruler. And his name is Apollyon, right? And that is associated with Apollos, the destroyer who destroys the old order and creates the new. That's kind of his role. Well, that's the Greek name for Osiris in Egypt, or Tammuz, right, in Babel. It's all pointing back to Nimrod and his seed. And Nimrod is the archetype of the Antichrist, and may very well be the person who comes and inhabits the Antichrist. So, it's pretty deep stuff. And, we think that Satan is coming down from heaven to inhabit the Antichrist at the midpoint of the tribulation. I don't know, because there's also this beast that ascends out of the pit. The whole world worships him and wonders at him. And he is Abaddon, Apollyon. And that's not just Satan, but I believe it's the seed of Satan. And he was dead of a moral head wound, and then he was the beast that was and was not and now is again, or something like that. I had to look it up in Revelation. Let's see, bottomless pit. I think if we look for that, we'll find it. Revelation 9:2, and he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out, and the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon. He's the king of the bottomless pit, and his name is Apollyon in Greek. And he is in 17, he's referred to as the beast that you saw that is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they who dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. In other words, at the time John is writing, this was a beast that was, but then is not. At the time of John's writing, is not, but then will be, and yet is. It's a mystery. So we don't want to get too deep into it. But the point is, there's a lot more going on than we realize. And the more you know about Babel and Nimrod and Jezebel, you see that there's something ancient. This is related to the depths of Satan, okay? Now, Nimrod and these beings from pre-flood days, all of this in occult lore. See, as the Bible shows us, it doesn't tell us all the details about this stuff because it doesn't want us worshiping angels and going after this stuff and making a hobby out of it. But it tells us how wicked that time was. Now, interestingly, the occultists see that time as a golden age. They want to go back to the days before the flood, and they identify it with this fallen civilization that existed before the flood was destroyed. But it was a superior technological utopia, and it was a spiritual utopia that consisted of men who were learned, wise men who were guided by these enlightened beings from the stars or the heavens, who dwelled with men and taught men the ways of the universe and hidden sciences and hidden knowledge that are lost to us now, and gave man access to powers that they look back for and yearn. And see, that's what Nimrod and Jezebel were about. They yearned for that prior day of the pre-flood day when the Nephilim were here. Somehow Satan recontacted Nimrod and reinitiated him into all this and gave him a taste of his stuff. And the Genesis says that the giants were prior to the flood and also after that. And Nimrod was one. And then we see, even the land, the good land was populated with Nephilim. And that's why the children of Israel didn't even get to enter the land, because 12 spies went and saw, and they said, look, there were giants in the land, the Nephilim, the descendants of the Nephilim, and we were as grasshoppers in their sight. They weren't exaggerating. That was really the case. And God decided, look, they do not have the kind of faith that it's going to take to dispossess the land of my enemies. And so they're going to have to wait in the wilderness for 40 years until that generation dies out. And Joshua and Caleb were the ones who got the good report and said, yeah, we saw that, but we could take them, So they got to lead the next generation of children of Israel into the land where they did destroy the Nephilim. And, even David encountered descendants of the Nephilim, Goliath and his brothers. So this is real stuff. And I think that the earth should be more thankful to Israel, because if they had not cleaned out the land, who knows what would have sprung up out of all that, And also with the giants in the land, I think I should leave it at that. Okay, so the point is that there were giants, and God finally cleaned out all that mess through Israel. But so there was still some of this stuff going on. Now back to Nimrod. He is the inspiration for occultists today, who long for a bringing back of the pre-flood times. And that's what the end time empire will be about, spiritually speaking. It will be a reemergence of those angels that had been judged and cast into Tartarus. They're going to be released for judgment, and they're going to be released on the earth, and it's going to be accompanied with all kinds of lying signs and wonders. And you say, what does this have to do with Christendom? And that's where we're going to start to get into now, because I said a few messages back that the New Apostolic Reformation is acting out a plan, or their doctrine is based on things that were written by occultists more than 100 years ago. And it all has to do with this longing for this previous golden age, okay? And a lot of the manifestations we're seeing in the wacky charismatic, far out extreme charismatic manifestations where people are flying around the room and being thrown across the room, all that stuff. These teachers are claiming to be in contact with angels. They are saying it from God. But in fact, they're these fallen angels. And we're starting to see a reemergence of all this stuff on the spiritual side. At the same time, we see this whole UFO phenomenon coming into play, right? And an apostasy in the church towards false doctrines and a regathering of the church back to Rome. I mean, it's all coming together in a really big way. We already know it's the last days, but it's amazing at the level of detail you can see. But we need to go a little further next time, because now we need to talk about the priesthoods that came from Nimrod and Jezebel, or Semiramis, sorry, that the mystery religions, because the Pope, as Pontifex Maximus, that name makes him the head of the mystery religion. I don't know if you realize that, but that title designates him the head of the Babylonian mysteries. That was merged with the state version of the Christian religion when the Roman Catholic Church came into power. So that's what links Jezebel to Mystery Babylon and the great horror and all the things that Revelation 17 and 18 talk about. It all ties together. All right, I'll leave it at that.